Hi, I'm Canine Specialist Mariam Froome, and we are going to talk about the 4 stages of learning in dog training. So the first stage of learning is the learning part, surprisingly. Alright, the dog learns a behaviour. Now, when we first teach the dog a behaviour, especially when it comes to puppies, we're just teaching them to go through the motion. Now, dogs are non-verbal, right? Which is why we teach them the motion before we add a command to it. Alright, so you might teach your dog to sit, but what you're actually doing is you might be luring them into place with a reward as such. So they don't actually understand the word sit at that point. They're just understanding that they must follow the food, up, down the bum goes, you know. So you might be luring them up and pushing their bottom down and that sort of thing, right? So you can see here, dog learns a behaviour. There's no command. It's just a position and a way to move the body, right? So how do we do that? Okay, we teach the dog a behaviour through gentle coaxing. So we might push down on their bottom. We might lure them up. You can see here through tools. Pressure, hand signals like this, right? This is actually the signal for sit. I wonder why that's the signal for sit, because we literally lure the dog from down to up, right? That is why that is the signal for sit. Same as the down, surprisingly, right? So we use positive reinforcement. We use these tools, hand signals, luring, direction, and markers, right? So we use yes, yes, right, to help them move through and understand where they're meant to be going, all right? So that's the first one. And now we're going to talk about static and dynamic rewards. All right, so when we want a dog to hold a position, we do a static reward, which means we are actually feeding the dog while he's holding the position in the position. Because if you always feed the dog out of the position, what do you think is going to happen? They're constantly going to pop out. And this is also one of the reasons that we use yes, good, right? The yes marks the minute they sit down. Let's say we're teaching a sit, and then we go good. Now don't go good job at this point, right? And the reason being is because the dog will pop out of the position because they're so excited about you saying good job. So we're going to go yes, good, good. All right, and that's how we use the markers. Now dynamic rewards are given when the dog's a bit flat, and we kind of reward them out of the position so to get the energy level up. All right, so they're used in different ways, which you learn in my courses, but that is static and dynamic rewards. Then, number 2. Now, the learning, the understanding come very quickly. You know, you'll lure a dog a couple of times into a sit, and then you'll start adding a verbal to it. You don't need to be doing that for days. It depends on what you're teaching them. And sometimes when you teach them, it's a lot of stages before you even get to a verbal command. Like, for instance, when I taught Koji how to take my socks off, all right, he kind of had an interest in socks. So he put a command to the tug. So he knew what tug was. And then we kind of had to put those pieces together so he understood that he had to pull my sock off. And it took a little bit because there were a few components to it. So sometimes that happens in dog training. You really don't give a command until the end, till the dog's got each component of that activity, all right? So 2, understanding. So this is where the dog really starts to understand what you're teaching it. So here add a verbal command, sit, right? You use the same thing, so at the same time as the sit, you're still doing the lures and the pressure and everything, so you're still teaching it so it understands that the sit means this. You work with the dog until they understand both the verbal and the non-verbal. So you can say sit and they'll sit, or you can pull up on your leash and they would sit, all right? That's basically the non-verbal and verbal. Now you're doing it just as above, but you are going to start weaning them off the luring and the pressure. Okay, so what that means is you're not going to be going sit, sit, sit every time, all right? You're going to eventually, once they understand the sit is combined with that action, which might take a week or 2, right? Depends on the dog, depends how fast they pick it up. It might take them 2 days. I doubt it, but you never know. Once they really put it together, that's what you want. Then you're going to start weaning them off. Now, the only time I don't wean dogs off pressure, I actually give them more pressure, is anxious dogs. And why do I do that? All right, so with anxious dogs, I actually give them pressure into a position and I give them pressure out of a position, because anxious dogs can't handle pressure. right? In real life, they crumble under pressure. So we can put pressure on them in a really nice way, in a way that they're rewarded constantly with something they like doing. They always win, like, so you go, sit, oh, good job. And then break, good job, right? Or whatever you're doing, you know, remember the free, the breaks, that sort of thing, whatever you're using them to get out of that position, and you're putting pressure on them in a nice way. So they understand to tolerate pressure. So if you don't have an anxious dog, don't worry about it, but that's generally how we use pressure. All right, now the next phase, and this is where everyone gets stuck, is phasing out. All right, so we use tools every second time, every third time. Now there's a lot of people that say to me, oh yeah, my dog will sit, but only for a treat, right? They've gotten stuck here. All right, we want you to move through. So the dog only gets it every second time. He might get a verbal every time, but I want him to start realizing he's not going to get a treat, he's not going to get his ball, he's not going to get that every single time. But every second or third time, he's going to get, as you can see, you still use the same sort of markers, but you use less, right? So you're using less treats, less pressure or whatever, except for anxious dog, like I said. And you're using them less often, but you're going to add more to them. So when they sit, you're going to say sit, and you're going to go, wow, good job, right? But they know by then to hold that, right? They're not going to jump out of position at the good job, because they've learnt in the meantime through these two phases that when you go good, they're not going to jump out, because you're going to go to put them back in, right? So this is where, and if they do the wrong thing, right, you're also going to go, hey, shh, right? You can go shh and really correct them, or you can go, hey. Now, I don't use the hey very often, all right? But if you have a reactive dog, obviously something that's dangerous, you know, that's putting like another dog in harm's way, depends what your dog's doing. So we always use the markers dependent on what the dog's doing. But if your dog's just doing something like it's not holding a sit, at that point he knows the sit, he should be in the sit, he shouldn't be getting up from the sit. I go, hey, shh. All right, my hey is just a hey, but my shh is like a oh, you're in trouble. And how I load that marker and why that ch is meaningful to my dog is because I go ch and I use a firm leash pop. All right, because you've got to remember dogs aren't verbal, right? So you could, some dogs you go ch and they go oh my god. All right, okay, that's enough for them, right? They also decide. Your dog will decide this. My dog, when I started using the ch, he was like okay. Like, you know, I'm not too worried about it. Other dogs will go get more excited about it. They go, oh, what, you know. So your dog, you have to kind of work to your dog there, all right? So use what works for them. And use a little bit of body language, because at that point they know the behaviour, and if they're not sitting, you go, hey, shh, and you kind of just step at them, all right? You've got to remember, dogs are non-verbal. So what we do with our bodies, if you go, shh, stop it, that's not really going to do much, right? That's going to make the dog go, oh, you seem excited. You don't seem annoyed. All right, get annoyed. Okay? Now, attainment is the last stage. All right? This is when the dog is reliable. This is what my dog had to be in his service dog test. He had to do everything without me constantly correcting him. Because in a service dog test, you can't use the leash to pop him or whatever. You can't pull on the leash once, because every time you pull on the leash, that lady's going to write it down in your test. So this is what Koji had to get to for me to do the service dog test, all right, and all the behaviours. So the dog's reliable without reward or punishment, all right. Verbal is enough. Good job, nice. You know, you can be pretty casual about it, but and it doesn't have to. You know, you don't have to go good job every time. You can just go sit and go and do something. You don't constantly have to go oh good job. But look, the dog does like it, so, you know, still reward him and still be nice to him, and, you know, don't just get so hard that you're just not ever saying good job or anything. You know, just give them, you know, something. I mean, they love you, they're working for you, right? So, you know, I still give him a lot of, oh, good job, mate, good job, you know, I give him a good job. So the only thing you have to do when they're at this point is simple proofing in a challenging environment. And what I mean by that is, so before I go to the shops with Koji, I have all his gear on him, and I actually I'll go through a series of obedience things. So I might make him sit, I might make him down, I might make him heel, and I do it all before I even go into the shops, because at that moment, if he's having one of those days and it's a bad day, because look, a dog can have a bad day, and it's very rare with Koji, but sometimes he has a day where he's like, I'm just You know, you can tell. If you've done enough obedience work, you know, you can see his sits and he's not really listening, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? He's just having a bad day. And it can happen, but it shouldn't happen very often if you've trained them well. All right, so sometimes, and that's why I proof before I go into a challenging environment, so I know where his head is at. All right, so how do you achieve attainment? You must be consistent through each phase. If you tell your dog to sit and then it gets up by itself, that is not being consistent. If every other time you've asked him to sit and then break to get him out of the position, you can't sit and then walk off and let him get himself up. You must be consistent through all your training. If you're consistent with your dog, you will get unbelievably good results. But there is never a time you can't be consistent, and it's especially true for intelligent dogs, because intelligent dogs, as soon as you let them get away with something once, they will do it and try and do it over and over again. So you've got to be very, very consistent. And you always must follow through. No excuses at all. All right? So if your dog does something, I don't care if you're talking to someone, you must go, hey! And he'll know, like just from you going, hey, oh, shh. He'll go, oh, and he'll correct himself. Like, you won't even have to do a correction at that point when he's at this point. All right? Because you've gone through all the phases, and same thing, just as above, you know, the leash or whatever, only when necessary and firmly. At that point, you should know better, all right? It's like, you know, you've taught your child to do something, they're doing it every time, and then all of a sudden they decide not to, you're going, haha, that's not on. Yeah, you're not getting away with that. And that's how you get a really well-trained dog. Okay, if you like this video, you can subscribe, you can get more content like this, and I'll speak to you guys soon. See ya!